Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/thestateofperfectbalance and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audible.com/thestateofperfectbalance and get started today. The State of Perfect Balance looks at solved and unsolved murders from the smallest towns across Ohio. We appreciate every one of our subscribers and read your feedback faithfully. If you feel that what we do is worth a couple dollars each month, please consider becoming a supporter. You can find out more on Podbean. And now, here's a word from some of our friends.
Do you love role-playing or tabletop games? Do you love Monster of the Week shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or Supernatural? Do you wish you could find a podcast that combines all of those things? Well, look no further. Thornvale is a narrative-driven actual play podcast following 3 monster hunters as they fight to keep a small town in Florida safe from the creatures that threaten it. It's full of action. So do you actually say that?
Yes, I'm actually going to say that. I'll be like, I'll distract him, you get him. And so I'm going to try...
Okay, Bjorn, how are you going to get him? Comedy.
I just got this image in my head. Now, this is me, not Sammy, of this dragon that was collecting materials for a chicken farm.
And truly awful dice rolls.
Nope, another 3. That's my second 3 in a row.
Oh my gosh.
We're killing this thing.
If that sounds like it's up your alley, then look us up wherever you listen to podcasts.
This podcast deals with true events of a violent and disturbing nature, intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
I just shot and killed my wife. Did you hear what I said?
I did, sir. What is your name?
I just shot and killed my wife.
Okay, where is your gun now? Is your wife, you sure she's deceased?
She was deceased. I just shot and killed her.
Would you shut up and listen to me for a second? I am about ready to kill my wife.
What's your
This
address?
is not a joke. Shut up and listen to me.
Okay, first I need your address and then I'll shut up.
Shut up and listen.
Yes, hello?
Hi, 911. Do you need the police or the ambulance? What's going on there?
A murder has been committed.
Oh, a murder has been committed? By who?
By me, ma'am.
By you?
Yes, ma'am.
Who did you murder?
I murdered my wife.
Hey guys, I'm your host Amanda, and this is The State of Perfect Balance. The story I want to share with you today about a blended family in a southeastern Ohio suburb is one that takes a turn you just don't see coming. Well, you won't see it coming if I tell it right. I don't think anyone saw it coming in this instance. Not family, not friends, even police who knew a bit more about the underlying problems in the couple's relationship couldn't have seen such a dark outcome. You've probably known a couple who just can't seem to make things stick. They're together, they're apart, they make up, they split up, and all the while they seem to generally get along. They seem like a good match, but there's some important piece of the puzzle that's missing or that they can't get a good grip on. Eventually, they split up for keeps, often amicably, and friends and family are left scratching their heads. Martha Madewell was a divorced mother of 4 who was active and popular in her small suburban community and stayed close to her children's activities. Her life was rather unremarkable, in a this-could-be-anyone, anywhere sort of way. Martha tried to make her 4th marriage work, and people around her had reason to believe her efforts were successful. But her life was actually broken, significantly broken. And this is her story. Heber Heights has a fairly short history as Ohio towns go, only springing up just northeast of Dayton about 60 years ago. It was a planned community and is named for the principal developer Charles Huber. Apparently, Huber liked bricks because Huber Heights is oddly known as America's largest community of brick homes. The little town has grown pretty rapidly, reaching a recent population of 38,000 people. Being located at the intersection of Interstate 70 and 75 certainly doesn't hurt. Huber Heights also has the distinction of sitting astride two counties, Montgomery and Miami. Martha Madewell married Larry James Gappin in 1993. She and her 4 children moved in with Gappin and his 2 kids at the time, but the home proved too small for such a large family. In 1996, the 8-member family moved into larger quarters in Huber Heights. So there was Larry and Martha, then his 2 children, Jimmy and Charity, plus Martha's children, Jessica Young, Daniel Marshall, Billy Madewell, and Brooke Madewell, though Charity Gappin moved out on her own. Both Larry Gappin and Martha Madewell were active in youth sports and were well liked in the community by the kids they coached or mentored and their parents. Gappin was a coach for the Huber Heights youth baseball and football clubs, and Martha helped to organize events for the Junior Warriorettes drill team as team mother. Jessica and Brooke Madewell were drill team members. Gwen Eshelman was a friend of the couple in Huber Heights. Her daughter, Renee Petrie, directed the drill team Martha helped out with. She said Martha was a very good person. She loved her children very much, and Larry was an excellent father. The kids he coached loved him. Eshelman also said they separated and got back together various times. I don't know what went wrong. But Larry and Martha just couldn't make it work, and the reasons are unclear. Gappin came to blame their difficulties, in part, on Martha's older children, Jessica and Daniel, who apparently weren't keen on the marriage or on Gappin. The couple split up in the fall of 1999, and in the spring, Gappin and his son Jimmy moved in with Jimmy's sister, Charity, in nearby Vandalia to the north. Martha and her 4 kids moved to a home on Pheasant Hill Road in Dayton. It's hard to know or understand the dynamics of this couple's relationship, but there were clearly remaining feelings. The 2, along with their respective children, continued to see each other and even take trips together. Gappin seemed to believe that they might get back together. Still, the couple filed official separation papers in the summer of 2000. The marriage officially ended, notably with a decree of dissolution rather than a less amicable divorce, in September of that same year. It all looked rather unremarkable to friends of the 2, and it looked that way because there were some very troubling things they didn't know. Back in June, at the time of the separation filing, Larry got himself in some rather serious trouble. He kept getting into Martha's house, usually while she was asleep, and doing really screwed up stuff. Once he tried to tie her legs together. In January of 2000, Martha called police when she found Gappin hiding in her closet when he was supposed to have left the house. Martha changed the locks. The thing about locks on doors, though, is that you have to make sure they're locked. Martha apparently didn't, and Larry kept getting in. He would come in while she slept and try to take her clothes off. Finally, she woke to find Gappin had tied her legs together again and was trying to tie her hands as well. She got loose and ran to the front door, with Gappin following. She got the door open and called for help, while Gappin grabbed her by the face and tried to force her back inside. Neighbors called 911 and Gappin fled, leaving behind a cooler of beer. Domestic violence and abduction charges were filed, and Judge James Hensley of Montgomery County Common Pleas Court issued a restraining order keeping Larry at least 500 yards from Martha at all times. He also placed him on home detention with an ankle bracelet while he awaited trial. Larry later claimed the abduction attempt was just his way of making her sit still so she would talk to him. He said he wanted to talk to Martha about the entire situation, and he feared she'd try to get away. So he tied her legs together, preventing her escape. Gappin's behavior was becoming a serious concern, and the electronic ankle monitor was meant to keep him away from Martha. Mistakenly, he was granted a work release petition allowing him to return to work at Federal Express in July. But that was supposed to be it. He was supposed to be at home, at the apartment he shared with Charity and Jimmy, when not at work. But it didn't work out that way. In no small part because Martha let Gavin come around. In violation of his electronic detention, he took Martha and the children to the Ohio State Fair in August of 2000, and he attended a cookout at Martha's house over the Labor Day weekend. Gavin began to feel like they might just try again and get back together. On September 16th, 2 days after the marriage was legally finished, Larry had dinner with a friend, Heather Morgan. Still wearing his wedding ring, he expressed his hope that Martha would come to see the light after a little time had passed, and that she'd realize he was a good thing for her. Speaking to Morgan on the phone the next day, September 17th, Gavin said he didn't understand why Martha wouldn't talk to him. He thought she might have someone else in her life, he said. I want to take a minute here and talk about those ankle detention devices which are supposed to keep people contained. They are used for the admirable purpose of keeping people out of overcrowded jails while the outcome of their case is yet undecided. But how effective are they? If we look at the area where our story unfolds, Ohio's Miami Valley, hundreds of people are on house arrest at any given time, with many of them awaiting trial for offenses both minor and serious while they're kept at home with a GPS monitor strapped to their ankle. But the number of examples of people slipping out of those ankle bracelets is rather profound, with violent and even deadly consequences. Like James Banks Sr.'s 14-year-old son who was on house arrest wearing an ankle bracelet when he was murdered. James Banks Jr. was on house arrest for a burglary charge and waiting for his trial in juvenile court. His dad and stepmom wanted him locked up instead of under house arrest. Banks was selling a gun outside his mom's apartment on Wexford Place in Dayton in March 2017 when the buyer shot him. The sale turned into a botched robbery. Banks's killer is now in prison. Montgomery County prosecuting attorney Matt Heck believes house arrest is ineffective and calls for ending the practice. It's just an absolute fiasco what's going on out there, he said. It's just an overrated system. Heck is adamant that he doesn't want house arrest to be an option for violent offenders. But Montgomery County defense attorneys John H. Ryan and his son John Paul Ryan disagree, seeing house arrest as an important tool that keeps accused offenders in place while their guilt has not yet been established. To say we're not going to consider house arrest is profoundly unfair, the elder Ryan said. His son explained why. People are presumed innocent regardless of what the charge is itself, he said. Let's look at some other cases. Trevion Montgomery cut off his ankle monitor and choked a woman who's now on life support. There's Justin Smith, a former soccer coach from Germantown, who reportedly sexually abused one of his former players. Right after he testified in his own trial on Halloween, he literally cut and ran. He took off from the courthouse before cutting and ditching his ankle monitor. He was spotted in Kentucky and Tennessee before he was arrested in Florida. He spent 45 days on the run. Mary Kay Sterling is the interim deputy court administrator in Montgomery County. She oversees pretrial services, the department responsible for tracking people on house arrest in the county. She calls Prosecutor Heck's concerns valid, but said, the few that have been that violent or have violated their detention compared to how many we've actually supervised on house arrest is a very low number. I do have a lot of confidence in the people who are monitoring people on house arrest. Montgomery County Common Pleas Judge Kate Huffman said, it's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week job. Huffman is on an Ohio Bail Review Task Force, which could lead to improvements to house arrest across the state. House arrest is just one facet of bail. I am not in any way demeaning the horrific things that happened in those 3 cases, Huffman said. But we don't have a crystal ball, and we can't predict what every person will do. Again, Heck points to 3 deadly examples in Montgomery County since 1999, including the case of Peter Atikpu. He was indicted in May 1999 for felonious assault and was placed on house arrest at his sister's home. In July 1999, he disconnected his monitoring unit and left the house. 11 days later, he killed 1 person and shot at 4 others. Now he is serving a 34 years to life prison sentence. Obviously, ankle monitoring is an imperfect means of containing an alleged criminal. It was a very ineffective way of containing Larry Gapin. Gapin walked about freely, seeing Martha, having dinner with friends, and doing as he pleased. Now back to the night of September 17th, 2000. At around 7:30 p.m., Gapin drove to Martha's home in Dayton, and as had become his practice, entered through an unlocked back door. He walked through the house and saw Martha and an unknown man lying on a couch. Gapin later said, "I didn't let them know I was there, and I just walked out the same way I came in." The man was Martha's ex-husband, Nathan Marshall, who was 40 years old. The two had been out together, and Marshall was spending the night. At about 8 the same night, Gapin went out for drinks with Jimmy and Jimmy's girlfriend, Casey Miller. Miller remembered that Gapin was drinking beers and shots. He revealed that he now knew Martha had a boyfriend, but he was okay with that, he said. No big deal. Leaving the other two, Gapin went back to Martha's house at around 12:30 a.m. on September 18th. This time, he brought a wood-splitting maul and a pair of work gloves with him. If you've not done any wood splitting, a maul is more or less a heavy, long-handled sledgehammer, one side of which is wedge-shaped. It's a seriously heavy tool, used for splitting wood logs into firewood. Gapin found Madewell and Marshall still asleep on the couch in the basement. Gapin, a FedEx truck driver and a father of two with no criminal record or history of drug use or any other problems, then repeatedly struck Martha and Marshall with the wood-splitting maul. She was struck 10 times in the head. Marshall was struck with the maul 18 times, including defensive wounds to the arms as he tried to fend off Gapin's attack. Both died of their wounds. Martha's daughter Brooke was sleeping in another basement room and awoke to the noise. She found Gapin in the act of murdering her mother, though she couldn't make out exactly what was happening in the darkness. Gapin told her to go back to bed, and she did. Gapin then removed Martha's pants, pulled her shirt and bra over her head, and had sex with her body. He covered the two bodies to the neck with blankets and rugs, leaving Martha under a coffee table. Remember that he blamed Martha's older children, Daniel and Jessica, for the breakup of the marriage. Jessica was asleep on the second floor, which is where Gapin headed next. While she slept, Gapin beat her more severely than the other two. Gapin had felt that Jessica had disrespected him and had been smart-mouthed. She got 17 blows to the face, neck, and chest. It was a horrific and brutal beating. Her teeth and pieces of her braces would be found all over the room and in her own stomach. She survived the initial attack. Daniel, Jessica's brother, was awakened by the noise. Gapin told him his mother was dealing with Jessica, who was in trouble. He told him, too, to go back to bed, and he did. Gapin woke Martha's son Billy, who was also asleep in the house, and took him out to his car. He then went back in for Brooke, telling her her mother needed a rest and he would get her to school. He then drove off with the two children, leaving Daniel behind. Daniel, after the house was again quiet, went to the basement to check on Brooke, who he thought was still in the house. He instead found the bodies of his mother and Marshall. Going upstairs, he found Jessica barely alive and trying to speak but unable to. He called 911. Jessica was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late, and her injuries were too severe. She died in the early morning hours. Police found the splitting maul covered in blood near Jessica's bed. It wasn't difficult to connect Gapin with the crimes, and he was quickly a wanted man. A description of Gapin, the vehicle he was driving, and the children he carried in his car was broadcast to area law enforcement as he drove around Dayton for hours with the two kids in the back seat, stopping to toss the bloody clothes he changed out of along I-75. Gapin was stopped and arrested by a deputy U.S. Marshal without incident at 7 a.m. He said while being cuffed, "I know what you were doing. I just wanted you to know the children were in the car." However, while riding in the police car, Gapin said he didn't want to talk about anything and that he wanted an attorney, which would play into some later maneuvering post-trial. By 8:30 a.m., Gapin was being questioned by police, and he provided a detailed confession. By the way of explanation for the terrible acts he had committed, he revealed that he had not been at all okay with the way the relationship had ended. "This has been building and building for months," he said. He told officers that Madewell had been playing him, and he wasn't going to take it anymore. He said he wasn't sorry for what he had done, and this was the best that he had felt in weeks. According to Gapin, he felt as if a weight had been lifted from him, and they were not going to hurt anyone anymore. He said he had not known who Marshall was when he killed him. Why did he single Jessica out for such brutal treatment? He said that she had always been disrespectful and talked back. She smoked cigarettes in the house, drank in the house, and that she was going to turn out, quote, just like them. Police asked why he had not attacked Daniel, and he said that Daniel didn't know how lucky he was to have escaped harm. On September 21st, the police searched Gapin's car and found Martha's purse on the front passenger seat. The purse contained her credit cards, her paycheck, a child support check, and 35 cents in change. Additionally, a copy of the dissolution decree of their marriage was on the front passenger seat. The official autopsy reports for the 3 victims specifically noted that they had died from multiple chop wound injuries. I don't know that we've seen that terminology used before. At trial, the transcript of Gapin's confession was admitted as evidence, though defense attorneys tried to suppress it. Gapin was charged with 12 counts of aggravated murder and 4 related felonies. Despite pleas of not guilty, Gapin was found guilty of all charges except rape. Again, sex with a corpse is not considered rape, but rather abuse of a corpse. Also, that's so sickening. The defense pointed out that Martha had, while Gapin was under house arrest and a restraining order, come to visit him several times, and he had gone to see her. They had dinner dates. It's hard to see why these points would help his defense. The jury found Gapin guilty on 12 counts of aggravated murder, 4 counts for each of the 3 victims, and other crimes including attempted rape and escaping from detention. During the penalty stage of the trial, jurors were instructed to deliberate and vote on whether to apply the death penalty for each of the 12 counts, and, if there was not a unanimous agreement for the death penalty on a count, to then seek agreement on one of 3 possible life imprisonment sentences. After more than a day of deliberation, the jurors sent a note to the judge saying they could not unanimously agree on a specific life sentence and are unable to render a sentencing verdict. The judge inquired if this deadlock applied to all counts, and the jury foreman confirmed that it did. Over defense counsel's objection, the judge then read the jury a standard instruction used in capital cases that included language directing jurors to go back over each count and reconsider the death penalty, as well as the alternative life sentences. After 2 more days of deliberation, the jury returned sentences of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for all 8 counts involving the murders of Martha and Marshall, and in 3 of the 4 counts involving Jessica Young. On the sole count of murder with prior calculation and design of Jessica, the jury recommended and the court imposed a death sentence. Though it seems a minor footnote in the wake of 3 terrible murders, the charge of escape stemmed from his being at large on the night of the murders while under electronic detention, and on appeal, the escape conviction was reversed, noting that he had not escaped from custodial punishment, as he had not yet been convicted of anything. The remaining convictions were upheld, though attorneys for Gapin claimed his confession was invalid as his indication that he did not want to talk to anyone immediately after arrest meant interrogation was begun before his Miranda rights had been administered. Gapin remains on Ohio's death row. Sure, people get emotional at the end of a marriage. Yes, there can be confusing signals from each side as things are sorted out, especially, as in this case, when there are so many people involved. 8 is a pretty big family, with a lot of relationship dynamics involved. But I don't think anyone could have foreseen that a guy with no real history of legal difficulties, no drug or alcohol problems, no previous psychological treatment, would pick up what amounts to a chopping sledgehammer and smash 3 lives out of existence. Whatever the nature of their relationship, I think it's easy to hear this story right up to the night of the murder and think about how unremarkable it is. This could have been any group of people anywhere in the world, shuffling children's schedules, coaching, helping out with their kids' activities. Even though they couldn't get it sorted as a couple, there was still nothing unremarkable in how things played out. Divorces, even amicable dissolutions, are messy and difficult, with lingering feelings, good and bad. This could have been anyone, but it ceased to be unremarkable September 17th, 2000. No one could have seen that kind of ending coming. Certainly Martha didn't. She felt safe enough with her former husband's mental state to leave her doors unlocked, night after night. Thank you for listening to episode 20 of The State of Perfect Balance. You can follow us on Instagram at The State of Perfect Balance Pod, on Twitter at State Perfect. We bring you new episodes every other Sunday night with solved and unsolved murders in the smallest towns across Ohio. And remember, lock your doors. Evil lives everywhere. Not all small towns are safe.